Well, again, it's just so amazing to finally be with you on a call to get to talk to you. And I'm such a huge fan of your work, and I think we're doing similar work. We have similar visions for bringing wellness, connection, resilience, trust, kindness, and compassion to the world, to workplaces in particular. And so I wonder if you could just say a few words about who you are and what inspires you to do the work that you do.
Wow. First of all, it's so fun because this is like the Mutual Admiration Society because I was sharing off camera with Andrea that like I've been like silently stalking her for so long. And so
I'm likewise.
I know. And so I was like, I gotta like kind of like not fanboy out and just kind of lock into the interview here. But I'm Shola Richards. I'm a keynote speaker and former consultant. I used to do that work where I'd go into workplaces trying to create kinder, more compassionate, and quite frankly, more civil workplaces. And my main focus is how we treat each other. And I believe this if I could, there's a couple of things that I would die on the hill for.
Hmm.
And one of the things I die on the hill for is that we are defined by how we treat each other. And I
Yeah.
think this changes how we show up for work, how we show up for our families, how we show up in our communities, how we show up for ourselves. And I am dedicating the rest of my life to help people to be able to remove the barriers that connect, that get in the way of us connecting more deeply, whether it's toxicity or incivility or harassment or bullying or discrimination, all these things that people see in workplaces and maybe don't have the tools to address. I am doing the work that I love to help remove those barriers so people can do their best work, ideally live their best lives. That's kind of my summary about what I do. But
It's
now that,
beautiful.
thank you. Well, speaking of beautiful, I'm so curious to throw that back at you, Miss Andrea. Tell me more
Sure.
about
Yeah.
you. What is it you do, and what is your mission in making this world a better place?
Yeah. Well, I am Dr. Andrea Hollingsworth. I used to be a professor. I had a long academic career, and I studied compassion. I looked at it from different scientific angles, historical angles, spiritual and theological angles, because I believe that compassion is one of these sort of crucial topics, especially for the world that we're living in right now.
Hmm.
I left academia in 2016 because basically I burned out. Um, I wasn't self-compassionate enough to realize that I had succumbed to sort of the burnout mindset of, you're not good enough, you never will be, you need to hustle grind at all times, or else your worth is under threat. And I sort of hit a wall, and I left academia and kind of wandered around a little bit lost for a while professionally until I decided, hey, you know what? I have a background in teaching. I also have a background as a psychotherapist. I thought I could take all of this research that I've done on compassion and I could turn it into tools that leaders could use to help transform their workplaces. And it started out with some free, just online classes that my community signed up for. And then one day, my neighbor, who is the head of HR at a local financial institution, she said, "Why don't you come in and teach your compassionate leadership program to my managers?" And I was like, "Okay." And that was it. It started about 3 or 4 years ago, this journey of working with leaders and giving them skills and tools to deal with not only the suffering that they're experiencing, because I think we can both agree that the world right now at every level is causing a lot of stress, a lot of suffering, a lot of inner turmoil. And when we're leading from that place, it affects everything and everybody. Um, and then also giving them tools to address the suffering on their teams, to be more attentive, to be more empathetic, and then to be action oriented. Compassion means to suffer with, and then also to look for solutions to alleviate the suffering. And so that's what I do now, and I absolutely love it. I can't believe um, that I get to travel the world and talk about something so passionate to me. Compassion has been a huge force in my own life, not just something I've studied, but something I've worked to practice, and it's an ongoing journey every day. And I'm certainly not perfect, but when you speak about the things you most care about and need to work on in your own life, it does help.
You're not
So,
kidding. You
yeah.
you brought up something that I have to ask about, which is so fascinating to me personally. So I'm kind of asking this a little bit selfishly. So when you were in academia and you're doing that work, and you said that you're almost in a sense feeling a crisis of self-compassion. I'm creating these terms, not you. I just don't. You didn't say that,
No,
but
that's right. That's perfect. Yeah.
I felt that. And so when you left academia in 2016 and you're about to branch out on your own, and your neighbor is like, hey, I'd love it for you to deliver this workshop for my people. Did
Yeah.
you have any crisis of confidence or self-compassion? Like, I'm not good enough to be doing this, or was this an easy transition because now you're doing this in a different
Yeah.
capacity? How did that transition work for you from you're doing this in academia, you're obviously a PhD and very smart and all these wonderful accolades, but you're now doing this in a different format, in a different
Hmm.
way. Did you have the crisis of confidence then, or were you able to kind of smooth into this because it's more what you felt was naturally calling you to do this work?
What a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. Well, one thing I will say is that for all the good things in academia, and there's a lot of good in academia, I'm all for research. I'm all for mentoring. I'm all for the good things that come there. But I will also say that academia breeds and muscles up a very strong inner critic.
Mm,
And so I have had to work really hard for a long time to soften the voice of my inner critic and to work with sort of the imposter syndrome that everybody has. But I think in certain fields it's a little bit more pronounced. It's this weird combination of, in some circles, of like narcissism and insecurity. And it's not cool. It definitely prevents you from being the kind of present, attentive, and compassionate voice and leader you need to be. So yeah, I would say that I don't know that I had a crisis of confidence, but I will say it's an ongoing journey of learning to trust myself and learning to continue to challenge myself, but also give myself grace. I certainly don't know everything. I certainly am not a perfect paragon of compassion every single day in my own life. But what I have come to really know is that we are all on this journey together. And mistakes and imperfections can be actually real gifts. Um, I remember one time last year, I spoke at a conference and I refused. I pushed myself to not do much preparation at all. I had a few ideas of what I wanted to say, and I got up in front of the audience and I said, y'all, can I start out by being really real? And they're all like, yeah, be real, be yourself. And I said, I have not practiced or rehearsed this talk at all. And usually I rehearse over and over and over. I said, will you all bear with me if there are some mistakes and imperfections in this talk? And they were like, absolutely. And it went on to become one of the best speaking experiences I've ever had. People are still talking about that session at Question Pros X Day last year. So I'm always finding a way to say, like, look, inner critic, I know that you expect me to be perfect and that you believe that if I am going to have respect, belonging, and love in my life, I have to be perfect at all times. I have to hustle and grind and hustle and grind. But here's another way. Like, what if I just trust that if I keep taking steps forward, the knowledge, the insights, the inspiration are there? And also, the most important thing is connecting with people.
mm.
If I can connect with the people in my audience at a real, authentic level, there's no way it's going to dive bomb. It's going to go well. And so that's what I focused on. And those are just little things that I continue to push myself to do to convince myself that yes, like this is the message for now. And for whatever reason, it's coming through me. And it's also coming through you. So
Well, first of all, that's very kind to even throw me into that. But I love the fact that what you just said is something that I think most people struggle with. Is this idea
yeah.
that I have this inner critic, this imposter syndrome, which is convincing me that I'm not good enough, and your willingness
Yeah.
to continue to act in spite of it. I truly do believe that it's our imperfections that don't disqualify us from this work. They actually
No.
qualify us for it. And the
Yes.
idea that I mean, I talk about kindness, and so still I have my bad days where, I get short with my wife,
Yeah.
or I get impatient with
Yep.
my daughters, or like, how come my dog's not walking fast enough, or whatever silliness that is like causing
Yeah.
me to get like really
Yeah.
agitated. In my private moments, I'd have times where, oh man, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. I mean, my God, my nickname is Brother Teresa, for crying out loud. So you get people who
Yeah.
are like, you should be the paragon and all these things, kindness. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, I do as I can, obviously.
Yes.
But I think that's the whole idea, is that if we feel perfection's required to do this work, then no one's going to do it. What we need to do is be able to grow through our challenges, grow through our imperfections, and continue to keep showing up, which you have done.
Absolutely.
When you got on that stage and you said at the beginning, and let's be real, Andrew, you know this as well as I do. I mean, how many speakers are willing to have that level of vulnerability from the jump? You walk out there, they introduce Dr. Andrea Hollingsworth. You walk out there and you're like, hey, y'all, just want to let you know before we get started that I haven't had a chance to rehearse this talk,
Yeah.
and just give me some grace as I work through this. And it's like, it's almost this weird feeling of like they get to exhale with you. It's like, oh,
That's right.
this is some weird polished talk where like
That's right.
where I'm gonna have this like these really rehearsed pregnant pauses and like, and then the moment
Exactly. Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
all changed. Like you're not doing any of that. You're just being like, hey, y'all, I'm doing the
Right.
best I can, and just
Yeah.
it's like I like her because that's how I am. I'm going
Mm.
to admit that I'm working through this, and we're all working through this together. And they
That's
get
right.
to go through this experience with you, where they give you grace, and I can see why that's so relatable. And it's a perfect example of compassion in action. You're giving compassion to yourself, you're giving respect to the audience, and in turn, they give that compassion and respect right back to you.
Mm. Yeah. Thanks for summing that up. That's exactly what happened. I have a question for you. Now, we both talk a lot about human connection. We do it from slightly different angles, and how incredibly important it is generally, but also for this particular moment in time, societally. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what is, in your opinion, what's getting in the way of human connection right now? That authentic, kind, compassionate, trust-filled space that, when you experience it, when people are truly connected, especially with their leaders. But why is that becoming harder and harder? And why are people needing to really think more intentionally about this right now?
Oh my gosh. Like, do we have like 8 hours for this? Oh my
I
gosh.
know, it's a big question.
I know. You're about to get on stage soon. So I hopefully I can give you some things to add to your talk.
Yeah.
There's a few things. Well, one, I think we're in this really strange time in society where we're almost prioritizing deconnection. If you think about it, even the daily
Yes.
activities that we do, if you arrived in San Diego for your talk at SHRM, and maybe you have, depending on where your hotel is, if it's not connected to the convention center, you have to take a Lyft or an Uber there. You have a
Yep.
little thing on the app that's like quiet ride, don't speak to me, right? If you're getting your groceries
Right.
delivered to you, it's like contactless entry, don't ring the doorbell. Like, gosh, we're in a place where
Yeah.
if your doorbell rings, you're not expecting people hide under the dining room table. Like, we're in a
That's
weird
right.
place where folks are almost like connection, don't talk to me,
Yeah.
noise canceling headphones, everything. So it's become
Yeah.
normalized, and it's
That's
almost
right.
the thing where it's like, why are we talking to each other? If you went to a coffee shop and you strike up conversation with the person behind you in line, like, weirdo, it's not
Yeah.
normal now. So it's become
Yeah.
normalized to be separate. And
Yeah.
now we have to take intentional effort, because this does creep into the workplace where people don't feel
Yeah.
connected and seen. And you add in hybrid work, or you add in
Yeah.
like, gosh, artificial intelligence, where people are literally having emotional affairs
Yeah.
of their spouses with
With their bot.
AI,
Yeah.
right? And it's like people are using AI as their therapist. So
Yeah.
reigniting human connection around kindness, looking someone in the eye, having these conversations like you and
Yeah.
I are having right now,
Hmm.
even though we're not in the same location, obviously, the
Hmm.
ability just to be able to look at each other and talk and have back to back feedback is a huge issue. So this
Yeah.
requires intentionality more than ever. And I think what workplaces need to consider doing is to have times where we're connecting about things that are not always work related, about the
Hmm.
full human. So I can understand, like, hey,
Hmm.
what are your fears? What are your hopes? Some people are like, oh, I don't need people knowing that about me.
Yeah.
It comes down to this very simple idea: when people like you, they will help help you. And I think about this at work. You can't do anything
Yes.
alone, right? So this idea of like the
Yes.
most toxic phrase, Andrea, well, there's lots of them, but one of which is really burns my soul these days when I hear people like, I don't come to work to make friends. I'm like, really, fam? You
Yeah.
don't? I
Yeah.
mean, here's the thing. A friend, by definition, is just someone who you like and respect.
Hmm.
Don't you want as many of these people as possible in your
Hmm.
workplace? People who you
Hmm.
like and respect, because you have to work on
Yeah.
projects together. You have
That's
to
right.
meet deadlines together. You have to work on teams alongside other people. And if you're a leader, God forbid, you got to help these people to be able to do their best work so you can continue to keep your job and your lights on in your home. So
That's
these
right.
relationships are required to do this. This is not a
Yeah.
nice to have,
Yeah.
or it's not an extra. It is something that we need to do. And intentionally leaning into
Absolutely.
that is something that's really important. But that's my take on this from a kindness lens. I could go deeper, but I'm also curious from the compassion lens and your deeply researched thoughts on this. What do you
Yeah.
feel like is getting in the way of connection at work? And why is this time so critically important to make this shift towards more human connection?
Yeah. Wow. I loved everything you just said. I have so many ways I could spin off from it. Um, but I'll focus on the question you actually asked me, which is my thoughts on what's getting in the way. Well, I have a background as a therapist, and I've studied quite a lot of neuroscience as well. And so I think about it. One of the lenses that I look through is psychology and neuroscience. And I think that part of what's going on is that we are collectively dealing with some trauma. There's collective trauma out there. Um, Obviously, human life has never been a cakewalk. Like, there's always going to be breakups and cancer and like crowds to deal with and stuff like that. But over the last, especially 5 or 6 years, the level of societal barrage of crises has pushed a lot of us over the edge in terms of our mental health and in terms of our very ability to reach out and connect with other people. Because
Mm,
here's what's true. When we feel threatened, when there's uncertainty in the air, our threat detection system, which developed to help us as human beings, gets fired up, and we're dealing with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And many people go into what's called autonomic hypoarousal. And I know it's a big word, but it basically means when your whole brain and body pulls back and says,
mhm,
I can't even anymore because it's much too much. I call this the crisis of the much too muchness of the modern moment. We are all overwhelmed with uncertainty, with the inability to really connect with each other without there being a very real threat of incivility in the conversation. Um, I think the things you mentioned about tech and AI, that's a perfect way for people to isolate even more
mhm,
often. And so, um, but here's the thing. When we are able to find the skills and the tools to deal with the suffering of our own fear and our own, sense of like, how am I going to navigate all this uncertainty, whether it's with my job or new technology or politics or the economy or weather, climate, whatever it is, or even just like rough stuff in my family. When we're able to find the tools to manage some of that stress ourselves and reach out to other people, and it does go together, responding to your own suffering and seeing, noticing, and responding to the suffering of others. That's a continuous loop, and they help each other. That is what builds the resilience to be able to survive and even thrive in difficult times.
mm,
Um, because we have evolved to co regulate. When we're connected in those moments of real, authentic, trusting human interaction, including in the workplace with people we call friends, it tells our brain and our body, oh, you can take a deep breath, you can focus, you can be aware. It releases your creativity. It releases a deeper and higher level of communicating. And that's when we do our best work, including our best work with our teams. And especially if we're a leader, that is when we are at our best.
oh
But
man.
we do need helps and tools because our brains, I think a lot of us, we are walking around um, basically in threat detection mode all the time, and it's physiological. You can't reach out and be the kind of leader you need to be, because, innovate like you need to be, solve problems like you need to do, if you are not dealing with the suffering in your life and in your team.
I love this so much because I think oftentimes when our sympathetic nervous system is just on overload and the cortisol is spiking and we're just in
Hmm.
this place of fight, flight, or freeze and we don't know what to do, when we're constantly in this hyper arousal state where we're feeling constant threats everywhere, and there's so many things
Yeah,
that we do that kind of unfortunately exacerbate this issue when we're
yeah,
constantly having breaking news alerts that's not even breaking coming to our
right,
phone 24 hours a day,
right.
or we feel like, John in accounting CC'd the entire leadership team on an email that was kind of innocuous and like, why are you doing that? Now I feel he's a threat too.
Hmm.
Constantly looking for threats. And unfortunately, because we are hardwired to view threats, as you mentioned, for our own
Yeah,
safety and for our
that's
own,
right.
this is how we've done this, where we're certainly going to be more prehistoric days, more interested in the saber-toothed tiger lurking around the corner than the apple tree over here, because if we were more
Yes.
interested, equally interested in the apple tree, we would be dead. We wouldn't be here to have
We
this
wouldn't be
conversation.
where we are today, would we?
So
Yeah,
we have to have that. But unfortunately,
for
now
sure.
when we have the tools to be able to see more clearly that there's not threats around every corner, it takes such an effort for us to be able to have this kind of this equanimity around, oh, hold on a second. The fact that this guy cut me off in a meeting does not necessarily mean that this
Hmm.
whole world is against me. It's just this one moment in
Yeah,
time, and I need to be able to put it in its proper perspective. But
yeah,
knowing this as a psychotherapist who also leans into neuroscience, and this is,
yeah.
I mean, whoever gets to listen to this, so I'm actually learning more about you. So I'm actually kind of disappointed in some of my stalking skills because I thought I knew some of these things, and I clearly need to do a little bit better on that. I find this to be super fascinating. And I also am interested in the practicality around this too. So when you're
Yeah,
talking around, whether you talk to audiences who get to bring you in and they are dealing with what I feel is a very unique time in our world's history where we're struggling and we're like, what's going on here? What, without giving things away, you'll just give me the full, like, IP on this, but is there one
yeah.
thing, one practical tool, or one thing that you share with audience to kind of help them to be more self-compassionate, less
Yeah.
overwhelmed with the world that they're living in right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I believe that compassion for others begins with kindness to ourselves, but most of us, especially leaders, find it really hard to be kind to ourselves because, as Brené Brown says, we live in a never enough world. A lot of us are walking around believing we're never enough. And so I start with self-compassion. And one of the things I often have audiences do is I lead them through kind of a mini meditation
Mm.
where they call to mind something in their life that's difficult or something that's bringing them a sense of, like they feel like they didn't do it good enough, right? Call that to mind and tune into what's your inner critic telling you about that? You know, is it saying like you don't deserve blah 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 blah, or you'll never be da 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 da, or you're gonna let everybody down, or whatever it is? And then I have them open their eyes and find a partner, and nobody has to, divulge the thing they're struggling with or what their inner critic says. But I have the partners pretend that the other one is their very best friend who came to them in a moment of vulnerability, asking for their support because they are dealing and struggling with the very same thing you were just thinking about, and they need support. What do you say to your best friend? Ready, set, go. I have them role play it, and it is incredible what people hear coming out of their mouth. Like, hey, you know what? You are doing the absolute best you can. Or, you know what, that is something that so many people deal with, and I've dealt with it, and that's like a normal part of human suffering. You're not failing, like that's just how it is. And also, you deserve to be kind to yourself. You deserve to give yourself some grace here. And how can I support you? And I say, now take those words and turn them back on yourself.
Mm.
Write it down, put it on a sticky note, because the way you responded to your suffering friend is the way you need to start responding to yourselves, because the way we talk to ourselves in our own minds actually does matter. So we start there, and then we move on to how do we begin to apply, express, enact compassion in the workplace, especially as a leader? You mentioned earlier, like, why not look at our colleagues as friends? Why not start developing some of those relationships of kindness, respect, and trust in the workplace? We don't need to be sitting there divulging our deepest, darkest secrets to one another at work. But I think that there's a deeper level of authentic human connection that often does need to happen. And so, like, another thing I have audiences do is I say, how many of you do icebreakers at the beginning of your weekly huddle? And like everybody raises their hand. That's a thing, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some people shout out, like, what was your last icebreaker question? And people shout out things like, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Or, like, everybody talk about a favorite pet or whatever. And I'm not saying that there's no value in those conversations, those lighthearted, like, hey, let's talk about some fluffy stuff of life and then get on to our business. But what if once in a while you asked a different question as a leader? What if you asked a question like, what is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in nature? Or maybe not in nature, just seen. And pretty soon everybody's talking about, encounters with something that really truly inspired them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at a deeper human level. Or like, hey, what dreams do you have for your life? What do you want to do? What's in your bucket list that you haven't done yet? And what's holding you back from that? And then everybody gets a chance to talk about, again, something it's not polarizing, it's a human thing. And now you mentioned, it's a lot easier to communicate with someone in your company that you feel a real human connection with.
Correct.
So one time I did this with an energy company, and this guy named Travis raised his hand and he said, I've always wanted to climb Mount Rainier. But, hey, I got married. I had some kids. I have a mortgage. And I've got a job. Yay me, I'm grown up. But I can't go out and climb a mountain or train to do that right now. Like, that's going to have to wait. And everyone's in the audience, anyone who has kids, who has a job and a mortgage, which is most, a lot of us anyway, are nodding their head. And I said, Travis works in billing. How many of you, if you have a question at all related to billing, are going to be a lot more likely to reach out to Travis and get that problem solved and ask him some questions now that you know him a little bit? And again, every hand in the room comes up. Mm-hmm. It's about creating spaces where people can connect at that level, because we suffer when we don't. And the company suffers too financially. If people are siloed, if they're not communicating, if they're not collaborating, and if they don't feel that level of genuine human connection, they're going to leave. That's a huge driver of turnover in companies, especially when the leaders aren't on board with that.
That's so well said. It's funny because one of the things I know we're going to be talking about is human connection and how we both define human connection.
Yeah.
It's what you just shared with the Travis story, I feel is perfect. I mean, when I think of human connection, those questions that you ask, by the way, are similar to what I do in my workshops as well. So I frame them a little bit around kindness. It's like,
yeah,
one of the things that I often ask, like, what is the greatest act of kindness that you've ever received? And it's so interesting because it's such an interesting question to ask someone, because most people hopefully are able to think of kindness that they've received. And it could be something very simple. And sometimes they talk about, wow, I was in a situation. Some people go deep. I needed a kidney, and some person who I went to high school with, who I posted on my Facebook page, and he reached out like, hey man, I mean, you were always so cool to me in high school. I got you. Like, what now? Like, and when these people are sharing these stories, or it could be something super small, or like, hey, I got a flat tire and some person came up to me and was like, hey, listen, I'm going to help you. And there's a total stranger. It's funny because what ends up happening with kindness, and there's science behind this, where someone hears about an act of kindness, the parts of their brain that lights up as if they're also receiving the acts of kindness, even though they weren't actually having the kindness happen to them directly. And so when people get to experience a group experience of kindness, it creates
Hmm.
this feeling of trust. And it goes back to the human connection aspect, right? So human
Hmm.
connection, in my humble opinion, is when something that matters to you, you find that connection in someone else, right? So whether it's like, oh
Hmm.
man, I'm a huge
Yeah.
Laker fan. Oh, I'm a Laker fan too. Oh, wow, you deal with mental illness. Oh, so do I. Like
Yeah.
these things that we find connection in or some
Yeah.
commonality in that creates a connection. So using the Travis story from the energy company,
Yeah.
when you ask the question, hey, how many of y'all, when you need something in billing from Travis, are going to be more comfortable reaching out to him based on what you knew about his interest in Mount Rainier and climbing it?
Hmm.
Hey, I got a mortgage, I got kids. I
Yeah.
can relate to that. Now, Travis
Yeah.
is fam. I get this guy now. I see him at a different level than I did when he was just a random email address in our company directory. This is
Yeah.
how human connection starts. And I just goes back to the kind of the earlier part is when we're not doing this and when we're not
Hmm.
reaching out and we're not having
Hmm.
these. And I think this is how we have a lot of instability in the world, not to go deeper
Yeah.
since we're here. It's like when
Please,
you look,
let's.
oh, hey, why not? Like you think
Yeah.
about all the divisiveness in the world, if
Yeah.
people were more willing to go deeper and realize the connections that we have, we create these monolithic avatars of the enemy,
Hmm.
right? They're all like
Yes.
this and they all do that and they're all threats to our humanity. But it's wild if we looked at them with more nuance. Like, hey, these people that you hate, they shop at the same grocery stores as you. They probably root
Yeah.
for the same sports teams that you do. They care about the
Yeah.
same issues that you do. Their kids go to the same schools that your kids go to. There's so much
Yeah.
in common, but we're like, no, they're evil people doing X, Y, and Z. And
Hmm.
it just takes that willingness to go deeper. And it's harder
Yeah.
because this requires some vulnerability, some willingness to maybe put aside old programming that you believed for so long about certain people to create
Hmm.
connection. And that's what
Hmm.
this kindness work that I'm trying to do is about. Is
Hmm.
like, listen, I'm not here to dismiss harmful behavior and like in people that are actively making the world a worse place for others. But
Hmm.
generally speaking, the middle, I think a lot of us may kind of look leerily at other people without really deep information and proof or receipts that these people are actually harming you. I
That's
want to go
right.
deeper with that. And what you just
Yeah.
experienced with that Travis situation is like the entryway to even deeper conversations around our
Yeah.
commonalities. And I wish more people would do that. And I feel like that activity
Yeah.
that you did is such a powerful way to hopefully open this door to like, hey, if I can do this in this energy company with this guy Travis, maybe I can do it with my neighbor, or maybe I can do it with this
Yeah.
person who's my family member who I don't see eye to eye with. And then we can
Yeah.
start creating this process of healing the world one person at a time.
Yeah. Absolutely well said. I um I think there's a qualifier in there some like there's some kind of a qualifier in there though that I'd like to ask or at least wonder about, which is, there's a very real there is sometimes a real threat that someone that you open up to somebody and you decide to be vulnerable and um you're gonna get attacked.
Hmm.
You're gonna get belittled. You're gonna get laughed out of the room. You're gonna get just overtly uh yeah, assaulted,
Hmm.
emotionally, verbally, whatever. Sometimes even physically. I've been working more and more with healthcare companies, and it is absolutely appalling
Horrific.
what doctors and nurses are dealing with right now. You know, during COVID, for a hot minute, they were lauded national heroes,
Yep.
and now it's the anti-hero.
Yep.
And so I went to see one of my doctors a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed as I was going up the elevator, there's this sign in the elevator that says, you know, aggressive, emotional aggression, verbal aggression, and physical aggression toward providers or any other patients will not be tolerated in this facility.
Hmm.
I'm paraphrasing, but it really struck me. I was like, there needs to be a sign in the elevator to tell
Yep.
people not to attack people in this hospital. Are you kidding me? And so I guess my question for you is, how do you balance that openness to other people and the willingness to reach out and be kind and vulnerable with the very real situation we're in, where some people really are just going to respond very badly to that?
Hmm. Oh, there's a couple ways. I want to address the healthcare thing because my wife works in healthcare and I cannot
Yeah.
speak more. You nailed it. I spoke at a conference at exactly the place that you're about to speak in a few hours in San Diego Convention Center.
Yeah.
And it was for the Emergency Nurses Association conference, and this guy came up to me and was like, "Dude, I was a police officer for 13 years. I've been assaulted more as an emergency room nurse in the past 9 months than I did in 13 years on the force." So it is a
Wow.
shifting, right?
Yeah.
So to answer your question more directly, I feel like this is where courage is a part of the conversation, which is
Yeah.
often not really
Yeah.
talked about with things like compassion and
Right.
kindness. You are absolutely not going to be pitching a perfect game every single time you get on the mound. You're going to put your best self out there. You're going to be compassionate. You're going to lean into a conversation and someone's going to swat it aside. Or maybe you'll make a bad situation worse with your attempt to make it better. And that happens.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
oftentimes what I hear is when people say, well, you know what, I'm going to sit on the sideline because, I don't want to get canceled or I don't want someone to think. I'm like,
Yeah.
we don't have that luxury right now. That's not
No.
an indulgence that we can enjoy at all in this world. So yes, you're
Yeah.
going to screw up. Yes, you're going to find people who take your kindness and compassion as weakness or worse. And guess what? You learn from it, you course correct, and you try again. Just like if we have
Yeah.
children, and so when our children learn how to ride a bike or do anything that's going to require some level of skill, they're going to screw up. We don't just leave
Yeah.
them on the ground like, hey, guess you're not meant for riding a bike. Like, okay, you
That's
get back
right.
on the bike and you try again. And I think
Yeah.
this is so important now more than ever because the risk is enormous. We have to do this now more than ever, leaning
Yeah.
into these conversations because God, if we don't now, if we
Hmm.
choose to sit back, I often think about this. The people who are unkind, the people who
Hmm.
are truly bad actors who have bad intentions, they're not sitting on the sidelines. They're not
No, they're not. No, they're right out in front.
they're right in the front.
They're
They're
right out in
like,
front.
let's go. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if we choose to fall back, then we're just giving them more space to be able to have a green field to do whatever they want. So
That's
we
right.
also have to stand up now, irrespective if our efforts are kicked aside. Because guess what? They will be once in a while. But I'll go, and this is unscientific, but I'll say 3/4 of the time, 80% of the time, maybe 90% of the time, our stuff will work out when you come with genuine kindness, sincerity, compassion, and love. And the
Yeah.
10% where it doesn't, we can't use that as an excuse not to try. I mean, we've had
Hmm.
talks where our talks have bombed. We've had, I mean, as a psychotherapist, you certainly had clients who you didn't vibe with or didn't vibe with you.
For
God, maybe
sure.
as a consultant, I certainly have had that with the clients I've
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah. Yep.
Doesn't mean we quit. We're
That's
just
right.
like, okay, there's something that we learn from that, and we move on. And I just wish more people would have the resilience and the courage to understand that it's not going to be perfect if we do this interpersonal work, but it's so important that we don't have the luxury to sit back and wait for perfection before we get started.
I love that. I love all of it. And I think it highlights the need for self-compassion as we are reaching out compassionately to other people. Because when it doesn't go well,
Mm.
you know, when we open ourselves up to somebody and they are uncivil or incivil, what is it? Uncivil? Uncivil.
Uncivil and incivility. So it's very interesting how
Okay.
those two working. Yeah, it's
I'm
very
like, how
tricky.
are the words working here? When they respond to us as, in sort of jerk mode, let's just say
Let's
that.
go with that. That's easy.
Okay. What do we do with that? How do we get back on the horse, so to speak? I literally grew up riding, so I think in those terms a lot. I fell off my horse a lot. I was had to get back up, right?
Exactly.
And I think part of it is learning to respond to your own hurt with kindness that is going to refuel you, self kindness that's going to
Mm.
refuel you. And so asking, just acknowledging, first of all, ouch. You
Hmm.
can say to yourself in your head, like, ouch. You know, I reached out with a kind act. I attempted to create like a positive thing in the world here, and I got mowed down. Ouch.
Hmm.
And then you remind yourself, hey, this is normal. I this is a human thing. Human interactions don't always go well. Sometimes people are just mean.
Yep.
You look at any playground in elementary school and can see it happening every day. And then you say, how can I respond with kindness to myself in this moment, even though, I'm hurting?
Hmm.
Or maybe especially because I'm hurting. And it can be as simple as refilling your water bottle or hugging your kid or petting your cat or whatever it is. But I think a really powerful way to respond to yourself when your efforts of kindness, compassion, and civility are going nowhere is to remind yourself of your values.
Yep.
And this is another activity I have audiences do where I have them envision, picture yourself as a 90-year-old, wise, weathered self sitting on a park bench somewhere, looking back on your life with just filled with gratitude and pride. You have lived it all, seen it all, survived it all, learned to thrive, crawled back from every struggle, and you've become the person you've always wanted to be. Now, what does that ideal future self say to you right now?
Mm.
You know, or what value words describe that ideal future you? And what would they say to you right now? And that's a way of connecting with, hey, when it's all said and done, what do I want my legacy in this world to be about? And how does that impact what's going on with me right now, especially if I'm a leader? And we're all leaders. At the very least, we lead our own lives, but a lot of us are leaders in our families, our neighborhoods, our churches, or places of worship, our synagogues, our communities, and our workplaces. And and so then when you can identify a couple of values that are your guiding light, right? It puts everything into perspective. And you can say to yourself, wow, like, yeah, maybe I reached out. Maybe, my top two values are courage and compassion. Maybe I reached out courageously to someone that clearly is suffering, and they just responded by attacking me.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. Like I showed up in a way that makes me proud in light of the person I am endeavoring to become in this world. And when people, I don't care what level they're at, leaders, mid-level management, frontline workers, whatever, when people are tuned into that sense of this is ultimately what I'm about, that is a massive resilience builder. But I will say that there's a bit of a crisis of purpose and meaning out there right now. I
Mm.
think a lot of people are feeling lost. I've been interviewing a lot of, especially leaders in healthcare. And again, that's a sector where there is just so much suffering on the part of, well, patients and providers. And there are lots
Absolutely.
of reasons for that. But I think one of the things that needs to happen is a deeper connection to purpose and meaning. But I don't know, maybe do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like the crisis of purpose is real. And I think people are
Yeah.
suffering in very, very real ways. When you were
Mm-hmm.
speaking earlier around, and I think this is so interesting, when we do see unkindness, and unfortunately, that does help people to lose purpose. Like, God, everything is so, you feel a sense of helplessness. Like, what's the point in showering? We're only going to get dirty again. And it's like, that's the same
Yes.
mentality. It's like, we got to
Yeah.
do something. We have to do
Yeah.
something. And I feel like one of the things that's really frustrating for me is when I do see people who are seeing unkindness and use that as the excuse to give up and just become like apathetic towards this whole thing. And I get it. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
defense mechanism. Things are hard, and
Yep.
what's my point? It's vulnerable to try and not get that back in return. I understand
Yep.
that.
Yep.
I want to take it a step further though, because I think one thing too that we have to do is that being kind also means being kind to self. Kind also includes accountability, right? So if someone
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
being awful to you repeatedly or harming you in some way, it is okay to be like, all right, this behavior has to stop for our relationship to continue. Or in some
That's right.
cases, some people need to be loved from a distance. I'm okay with that.
Yes.
I think
100%.
there's so much power
Yeah.
in, I talk a lot about this kindness thing because kindness gets so, I don't know, kind of misconstrued as this weird idea of like, no matter how people treat you, bring them close and kill them with kindness and all this type of stuff.
Right.
Sometimes it just doesn't work.
That's
Sometimes if
right.
someone is harming you and you continue to hold them close, you're only putting yourself and potentially your other loved ones who do treat you well in harm's way
Yes.
as well. I saw a really good case of this with
Yes.
one of my speaking attendees who came to one of my talks, and she's like, look, I had a very toxic relationship with my father, she said, and he was awful to me. And I made a decision that I'm going to offer him kindness. I'm going to forgive him while still testifying against him in a court of law. That is what I'm talking about. So there's accountability. Like, I love my
Yeah.
dad. He has done some pretty horrific things, but he's still my
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
And he needs to be accountable for the things that he has done. And I'm going to hold him accountable by testifying against him in a court of law, even though he would probably prefer that I did not. This is the next
Yes.
level of kindness, that fierce level
Absolutely.
of kindness, where it's not the
Yes.
soft rolling over thing.
No, it's not.
There is accountability, and there is the need for clear boundaries, so we're not being walked all over. And this gets us into a position where we have the energy and the capacity to give kindness to others, because we're not just this open door allowing all sorts of random, awful, harmful behavior to come in. We're like, no, you can come in. You cannot, hey, I'm going to try to give you kindness. Oh, you didn't accept it? Okay, cool. I'll try again. Oh, wow, you really are not about this kindness. I'm going to move on. And this is how we continue to make these decisions in real time. But if we do run into unkindness and we just give up and throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, terrible metaphor, I never know why that even existed for so long. It's like we have to lean into showing up again. We just can't quit at the first sign of discomfort and challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a new note, 3 to 5 minute warning. Okay.
3 to 5 minute warning.
Minutes.
So we would talk for hours. We're just getting started.
I know. We could just keep going. We could keep going forever.
I know.
But I wanted to respond to what you just said, because I think it is so incredibly important. And I get this too. People hear the word compassion and then they're like, I don't need all that soft, squishy stuff. Like, people are just going to mow me down. Like, why would I do that? I need to be a strong leader, you know? Mm-hmm. And they oppose strength and compassion, assuming that they're polar opposites.
That's the weirdest thing.
So one of the things that, I mean, there's a couple things to say here. First of all is, like, amen to boundaries. You were talking about boundaries. Sometimes you need to, act with all the kindness you can and say, like, this and no further, or there's going to be consequences.
That's right.
To your bad behavior. And I truly believe that kindness and compassion on one hand and accountability go hand in hand. And I use the language of doing hard things with heart. So, compassionate leaders are direct. Like, I love Kim Scott's work on radical candor. In fact, she almost titled her book something like Compassionate Candor or something. I think she mentions that in the foreword. So, one of my best friends is the CFO of a company that makes snack foods for kids. And a number of years ago, one of the people on her team made a massive, massive mistake, like a $2 million mistake.
Oh my God.
And she's the CFO. And so she called this person into her office. And the first thing she said was, I have to have a difficult conversation with you. She's one of the most compassionate leaders I know, but she does not beat around the bush. And she asks questions, to help me understand what went into this. Not condescending, but genuine, like opening up to, like, what were the factors that led up to this mistake?
Curiosity.
And curiosity, exactly. But she refuses to see people through the lens of, like, this failure defines you, But at the same time, it's like, this is going to be a difficult conversation. There's going to be some consequences here, and there's going to need to be a very clear path for demonstrating that, your performance is improving in a way where this isn't going to happen again. And here's what needs to happen by this time. And that too is compassionate, because there's nothing more disempowering than walking away from a meeting with your leader with a sense of, like, I screwed up and I don't know what steps to take.
Right.
So absolutely, accountability and kindness and compassion need to go together. They have to, because otherwise you're either an a-hole or a doormat.
Exactly.
Like, those are the other options.
And they both suck, and neither of those are helpful, right? And the challenge
Absolutely.
with that is when you see folks that think about this really weird idea around strength being separate. I often ask my audiences, do you have the strength to be kind? Because that's the question I'm curious about. Because if you're going to be honest, letting social media determine which relationships you should hang out with, what political party you're with, or whatever podcast host tells you what to believe, that's weakness. That is the inability to be able to look past what people are telling you and to be like, you know what, I am a strong person. I can make my own opinions and my own thoughts and my own judgments around what's going on in the world. This requires strength, and it's not common these days. And that's why I'm challenging people to, like, if you really want to make this strength is universally appreciated. Like, man, I want to be strong. Well, here's the thing. Compassion requires strength. Kindness requires strength. Giving altruism to people who do not look like you, vote like you,
Hmm.
love like you do,
Hmm.
we're so tribal. Back to the beginning part of the conversation, we're really like, I feel safe with people who are familiar. And these are the people that I'm giving the kindness to. Well, if you can
Hmm.
step outside of your evolutionary wiring to give kindness to people who do not love like you, live like you,
Hmm.
pray like you, that's how we can really create a kinder, more compassionate world.
100%. Okay, here's a lightning round question. In
Ready?
one sentence, what's one thing leaders can do today to begin to create a more kind and civil workplace? One
Hold
small
people.
thing.
Oh yeah, one thing. Okay, I'll make it so. Then I'm going to ask you the same question. Gosh, hold people accountable for behaviors that are harming the team.
Mm,
I think a lot of times bullying and harassment is overlooked because this person's a surgeon and brings in millions of dollars
hmm.
every single year. No, you have to hold people accountable for bad behavior.
Yes,
That
you do.
creates trust. So back to you. What is one thing, one sentence that leaders can do to create more compassionate workplaces?
Begin to hone your awareness.
Hmm,
Your awareness. Let me flesh out just a little bit.
please.
We're all walking around so incredibly distracted. My phone, the lights and blings and sounds make me feel like a caffeinated squirrel in a nut factory. I'm all over the place. We cannot tune into the suffering within ourselves and within our team if we are not present and aware. And so, one quick thing you can do is go into notifications on your phone and turn off notifications on a handful of your apps, right? Just a very small thing you can do to make you a little bit less digitally distracted because that's a huge problem right now. So begin
Gosh,
working on your awareness and find very practical ways to do that.
amen. We did it. We did it. I mean, I feel like we got in right before the buzzer sounds. We have literally 3 seconds before it turns 8:30.
Amazing.
I'm so
Yeah,
grateful for our time, Andrea. You were
me
fabulous. This
too.
was
You are
everything that I knew it was going to
amazing.
be, and I'm just so grateful for our friendship is going to go from here. This is just the
Yes,
beginning.
it is just the beginning.
This is just the beginning.